chairs?
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for coming. This is a stage reading of my play Voices. Actually, this is the first play, my first New York play, produced in 2014 at the Gallery Players in Park Slope, Brooklyn. And obviously, it was on a stage there. It was a full production. But we don't have a stage here, as you can see. So for a stage reading, I just want you to pretend that this is the stage and you are the audience down low. Because at the end of the play, my actors are going to have to stand up, come forward, and look down at you because you're on earth. They are in heaven. So just imagine the stage, okay? Jim Morey is our George Bernard Shaw. He's great. Be sure to applaud for him. Susan Litton is getting ready. She's our Joan of Arc. And because she is close to my age, we decided it'd be a good idea for her to wear a costume so you can remember Joan is young. Okay. And Neva Corbin is she's reading stage directions for us. In a stage play, there's no scenery, there's no props, there's no costumes, and the actors read from the script. And usually the script is perched on music stands. But we are going to have some movement here, which you would not have in a true stage read. Some movement because it will help you envision what they're doing. And Neva will read stage directions. John, my husband, is the apprentice sound engineer. Pray for him.
And I'm colorblind. I thought this was red.
Okay, so we're all tuned in? All right, ready. Welcome, and please try to enjoy Voices.
Voices, a one-act play by Nedra Pezold Roberts. Time, eternity. Place, heaven. Characters. Joan of Arc. She is 5'3", dressed in the light armor of her French soldier's uniform, complete with brigandine bearing the print of the fleur-de-lis. Belted around her waist is a sturdy leather sheath that houses a short sword. She carries herself with a dignity that is both natural and physical. Although her age's death is not certain, somewhere between 17 and 19 years, she is no child. She has commanded both king and army. She is used to giving orders and having them obeyed. Yet, for all her worldly confidence, there is a bit of a seasoned soldier, but also a guileless farm girl. Her curiosity prompts her to test objects around her, as well as shoot pointed questions at her target, George Bernard Shaw. Her body is often an outward expression of inner thought. For example, when frustrated or impatient, she doesn't simply sit, she launches herself into a chair. Having thrived in a world of power and action, she finds herself restless in heaven, unable to stay put anywhere for long. Her physical actions can be seen as the counterpoint to Shaw's restrained, dignified posture and his intellectual calm. George Bernard Shaw. He is almost 6'2". Since the term eternity connotes a sense of timelessness, he appears not as he was at his death, a fragile 90-year-old man, but instead as the sharply intellectual curmudgeon, an energetic rebel, perhaps in his 70s or even younger, since age since age is meaningless in heaven. He is dressed in a smoking jacket, trousers, his familiar boots, and carries a pipe. He moves with deliberate control as if analyzing a space before he enters it. He and Joan have come to know each other well, possibly as the result of their being frequently summoned to the Department of Celestial Adjustments waiting room. Their familiar discussions, often snarling, but always evenly matched, are to him both exercise and entertainment. He respects Joan and feels even a grandfatherly protectiveness and affection toward her, yet she is ever his intellectual opponent, to be given no quarter in debate. Voiceover, a receptionist who is briefly heard but not seen. At Rise, an empty stage, save for a small table between two chairs, a filled bookcase, and a freestanding, oversized door on which is printed Department of Celestial Adjustment. George Bernard Shaw sits restlessly and perhaps a bit resentfully, waiting like a school child called to the principal's office. Joan of Arc enters, and the two eye each other.
Joan.
Mr. Shaw, I might have known you'd be here too.
Joining me for another reprogramming session?
Why, have you been bullying the residents again?
I? A bully?
You forget, I watched you for years down there, almost a century. Who's your latest victim?
Victim, indeed. Apparently, I insulted Mother Teresa.
Again?
We were merely having a lively discussion.
Not about submissiveness, I hope.
I think it is fair to say I simply pointed out the flaw in her theology. That her mission to live amongst the poor, to see a spiritual goodness inherent in their poverty, was misguided. In essence, she made herself as powerless as they. Had she sought the political clout to lift the poor out of poverty, she would have accomplished a far greater good.
And she thanked you profusely for that gentle enlightenment.
She did not. The ungrateful woman is devoid of any subtlety or sense of humor whatsoever. She cut off my head and handed it back to me.
I'd like to have seen that. So it was her complaint that brought you here?
Of course not. She would never whine. The unamiable woman is carved from a billet of steel. Christian fanatics make me rejoice that I am neither one nor the other.
That is no way to speak of a saint, Mr. Shaw.
In heaven, a saint is no one in particular.
Who then?
What?
The complaint.
Some toadying ignoramus who assumed a small woman must inevitably be a helpless one. Why is stupidity always so unoriginal?
I believe, Mr. Shaw, you would know that far better than I.
Touché. Yet one might reasonably wonder why you have also landed here again.
Oui, but my situation is the result of a misunderstanding.
Indeed. And what have they misunderstood this time?
What they always misunderstand. I wasn't being disrespectful, I was being honest. I refused to lie when the Buddha praised the virtues of contemplation. I told him what I thought.
What a surprise. I, for my part, am tolerated and even largely admired for lying. Of course, my lies are commercially countenanced since I promulgate them as plays.
You may exploit the lie, but I told the truth. Contemplation is boring. Heaven is boring. Do you know how long I've been here? There's nothing to do but talk, 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 think, think, think. Soon I'll be insane.
Some would argue that you arrived here in that condition. Perhaps you shouldn't have been so keen to rush the journey. As for me, I find talk agreeable, so long as it is my own.
Look what that got you. You spent a lifetime talking about big ideas, from Fabian socialism to the life force and Superman. My way was simpler. I trusted in God.
Well, whilst I might quibble with your details, I am astonished that you know so much of my work without having been able to read it. I suppose I should be flattered.
I am no longer the child I was when I was alive, Mr. Shaw, and for my part, I have experienced years of astonishment over your errors. My observations were not intended as praise. I was criticizing you.
And I submit to you that criticism is the most gratifying kind of praise. Indeed, given that congratulations are seldom sincere and that the worst sin towards our fellow creatures is indifference, I should vastly prefer criticism.
Do not ply your histrionic skills on me, Mr. Shaw. Criticism is criticism, and you deserve mine.
Arrogance does not become you, Joan. Youth may have its advantages, but wisdom is not necessarily one of them.
Yet, despite my youth, I made change happen. I led an army to victories in Orléans, Patay, Troyes, and then in Turin, and had Charles crowned in the cathedral. I embraced the sword and gave France a king.
Rubbish. Nothing is more obvious than that war begets further violence. The only sane solution is to resolve differences with words, not weapons.
Try offering that lecture to an enemy ravaging your village. They'll agree, I'm sure. Heaven suits you, non-stop conversation. But I need a life of action. Without that, I might as well be dead.
My dear, you are dead.
But my soul is not. Nor is yours, however much you insist it doesn't exist. The contemplative life may be fine in a colorless world, but our Creator has painted the earth with bold hues that pulse with energy and light. I miss that variety in the fields and forests of my little village of Domremy, the feel of a breeze across my face, the warmth of the sun on my skin. When the judgment came that I was to spend my life locked in a dark prison, I knew the courts were evil, that I had but one way to escape. I was better off dead than buried alive. You always thought you could lecture evil away.
And you believed you could pray it away with the sword as an incentive. You loved the exhilaration of battle.
And you abhorred the nakedness of violence.
Yes, you chose the sword, I chose the pen, which they say is mightier than the sword.
Only for those who can read.
Have you never considered how much energy there is in the life of the mind? With that energy, you can lead countries, fire the hearts of whole populations, ignite possibility.
I did that, remember? All that happened was that they ignited me.
Point taken. So, you were rude to the Buddha?
I've never been rude, and I've always been honest, sir. I speak the truth.
As you see it, pray do not presume that the two things are the same.
Of course I speak the truth as I see it. How else would I speak it? If I did otherwise, I would be lying. Someone who lives the life of the mind should be able to grasp the patent obviousness of that.
Patent obviousness. My, you've been improving your vocabulary.
I may have been a young peasant girl from a tiny village, Mr. Shaw, but my speech had the power to sway a nation. Soldiers followed me into battle, seasoned knights in arms. I won Charles' confidence and gave him a spine. I taught him to be king, a leader of resolute and unswerving will.
What a stunning concatenation of fallacies. You used to credit your voices for those golden speeches. Do you now contend it was your own voice all along?
I steal no credit from my voices. They showed me my destiny, told me everything God wanted me to do, and gave me the courage to do it. My voices trusted me to obey God.
I really must draw the line at exaggeration, Joan. I am greatly disappointed. For someone who heard mysterious voices on the air, your mind has an amazingly literal bent.
My voices were not mysterious. They were Saints Catherine, Margaret, and Michael, and they came from God.
Your voices.
My voices.
All right, Joan. For the nonce, let us set aside all rhetorical skirmishes and consider a possibility. In all the time you've had to observe humans down there clinging stubbornly to their favorite ignorance, have you never come across the ailment called temporal lobe epilepsy?
What lunacy has seized your mind now?
Humans have called it by many names. Possession by a demon or witch.
You stoop to the familiar indictment.
Emotional hysteria. Psychosomatic disorder. However, it's actually the abnormal activity of neurons in the brain. Tennyson suffered from a more common form of epilepsy, as did Dostoevsky, who described his seizures as intense experiences of joy, peace, and fulfillment. A curious perspective, is it not? But then in frigid Russia, one must find ecstasy where one can. Victims of the temporal lobe variety are frequently deeply religious, and can succumb to fainting spells or see visions of a presence bathed in light. Even hear voices emanating from mysterious sources. The condition often appears at the onset of puberty. I believe you were 13 when you first heard St. Michael speak. Were you not?
I saw the saints as clearly as I see you now, and my voices came from God.
Your voices.
My voices.
It may surprise you to know that during my life, I heard voices as well. I'll wager every writer does. Those nagging little voices that awaken you from a peaceful sleep, tossing you into the middle of conversations that eventually bloom into whole plays or novels. It happened to me all the time. Eliza, Alfred Doolittle, Jack Tanner, Candida. I wrote over 60 plays, my dear, and the characters all came to life during conversations in my head. Perhaps, if you'd been taught to read and write, your voices would have made you a playwright instead of an innocent burned at the stake.
Your voices are nothing but imagined prattle. My voices spoke God's truth. They were sacred.
As were mine. The artist communicates truth through the voice of the imagination, just as you spoke your truth through the voices of your epilepsy.
You cannot distort my voices. They and the church made me a saint.
Your church slaughtered you.
I died a martyr's death.
Martyrdom is the most obvious way to become famous without ability.
At least I died for God's cause. You merely entertained the masses.
As your immolation entertained your enemies, but perhaps you were too distracted at the time to notice. Have you never wondered to which voices those admirable thugs listened?
Bah, they were too busy badgering me with silly questions about my choice of men's clothing to hear any voice save their own. I was beset by men with thick heads and exceedingly small minds.
Yes, they knew nothing and thought they knew everything. Clearly requisites for the political realm. However, insisting that you return to women's garb was obviously the bishop's attempt to control and demean you. It was meant as humiliation for having frustrated their authority.
My voices bade me answer boldly. I knew they would keep me safe. Remember, I was there, you weren't.
Rubbish! You weren't there any more than those people down there on earth. You were floating in some emotional fog, completely apart from the evil snarling around you.
The heat of interrogation burned through that fog quickly, leaving clear understanding behind. I saw their traps well enough to avoid them.
I researched your trial, Joan. I read every word of the transcript.
You copied it for your play, you mean, then let the world believe you'd created my testimony.
He strikes a match. She instinctively recoils, but he merely lights his pipe.
Ingrate. I illuminated your life by turning travesty into art. The court's judgment preceded the trial. Evidence was cut and shaped to fit the intended verdict. I helped everyone see that. You didn't understand half the questions you were asked in those sham proceedings.
You congratulate yourself for helping me? Your art be damned.
She moves into a light spotlight, reliving the memory, one hand on his book as if swearing to testimony in the court.
The bishops insisted that I swear the whole truth. Fools, only God can know the whole truth. So I ignored the questions that I thought stupid and answered the important ones. My voices made sure I understood those.
Joan, I applaud your conviction and sincerity, but we are all plagued by voices. Conversations constantly filtering through our minds, clever things we should have said if only we had thought of them at the right moment. We even have a name for that annoying spoil sport that keeps us from giving in to our baser instincts. Socrates called it his daimon. We call it a conscience. Incidentally, he also began to hear his inner voice at the onset of puberty.
You speak as if only those voices that spring from the brain can be counted as legitimate. You place your trust in the voice of reason, but I speak of the voice of the soul. It discloses the transcendent ultimate reality, which is God. My saints uttered the soul's wisdom and sent me all the guidance I needed.
Yes, well, Socrates' little voice, like your saintly ones, got him killed all the same.
My voice spoke for the true God.
True God, a deity, created in your imagination. History overflows with private little gods the gullible masses have sculpted from the seductive voices of hatred, bigotry, greed, and ego. Those depraved voices plunged the world into wars, forcing the rest of us to worship at their shrines.
Sacrilege!
She cries out in a spite of rage and advances on him, drawing her sword from its sheath. Before she catches herself, in the same moment, he instinctively steps back, his book opened and raised in defense as a shield. Frozen, they eye each other in frightened silence, aghast. Then the spell is broken as they both awkwardly regain control. George Bernard Shaw drops his protective hands, still holding the book. Joan, in confusion, examines her sword. Stunned by her own aggression, she pulls back into her inner thoughts, as if amazed to find the sword in her hand.
This is one of the swords I carried into battle. It was given to me in Valcourt by Corbin de Baudricourt. It is not St. Catherine's sword from her church in Fierbois. Still, this is a good sword and true, yet I have never killed a man.
Your record remains unblemished, as I am already dead. Oh, Joan, you still don't understand, do you? Centuries of hindsight and you still don't understand. You committed the ultimate sin when you confronted the clergy with their own irrelevance. If a common penitent could communicate directly with her God, there would no longer be a need for silly gatekeepers such as priests or bishops or even the Pope himself. You left the church no alternative. It had to eliminate you, or you would have been eliminated it.
But the church exonerated me all the same. 20 years after my death, they recanted, and eventually they even canonized me.
Small recompense. You weren't burned because of God's will. You were burned because frightened men were desperate to save the system that kept them in power. It was always about them, Joan. We must be perfectly clear about that.
You've been a cynic too long, Mr. Shaw, blinded by the dazzle of your own discourse. Take care. When you dance with the devil, you move to his rhythm.
Astute observation is often called cynicism by those with faulty vision.
Oh, I see clearly enough. I see that you are in league with the devil. You would make me doubt my God. You would have me question my voices.
So I suggest that you suffered from temporal lobe epilepsy, and you conclude, I am a demon-possessed. Devils and voices indeed.
Yes, devils and voices. Arrogant man. You are nothing but a bully, just like those men who tried to break me. Do you not see your own weakness? You assume that my voices are silly, and I am nothing more than a misguided, gullible child. But consider what you must give up if your supposition proves false. Your understanding of reality must shift, and all your comfortable assumptions put at risk. And that, Mr. Shaw, is the consequence you dare not consider when you dismiss the source of my voices.
A serious consequence indeed, if my suppositions were to prove false. However, neither your blustering nor your personal convictions are sufficient to disprove my argument.
But do you have the courage to genuinely entertain the possibility? Or is that beyond your arrogance?
Arrogance? What I will entertain is that each human fancies himself,
Or herself.
fancies himself or herself a god, creating reality in his or her own image. But I wonder, is it arrogance that moves us thus, or desperation? What do you seek, Joan?
To serve and glorify God.
By wielding that sword on the battlefield to shed the blood of your enemies.
By vanquishing God's enemies on the holy soil of France. As you attempted to vanquish yours, it would seem, on the battlefield of ideas, did you not? Jamais, 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 I will never understand how you made it here into heaven. Your faith is far too weak.
I confess I am also surprised to find that there is a heaven, annoying though it may be. But by faith, I assume you mean my faith in your version of God.
There is only one God.
Joan, a person might share what you call your God, yet not share your theology. After all, I am known to be an atheist, even by God.
God is God. If you don't believe that, what do you believe?
His breaking point. His control snaps and dignity crumbles as he slams the book at her feet. The physical violence of his frustration has her making the sign of the cross as she jumps back and away from him. He prowls toward her.
Enough! I believe in the redemption of all things by beauty everlasting. I believe in what the voices of imagination and intelligence can tell us. I attend to the voices of compassion, the elemental kindness one human can offer another. These are the angels that can light our way to justice, equality, and respect for life.
Collecting his emotions in confusion and embarrassment now at the nakedness of his outburst, chastened and subdued.
These voices can change the world. Although at the moment I find myself a poor champion for those beliefs, having lost my composure in the vulgarity of vehemence, I beg your pardon.
Enfin, it seems that we both believe in voices. And why not? I spoke the truth my voices dictated. Your writings let your voices speak yours. But perhaps we were each voicing truths no one wanted to hear.
It is, on the whole, quite probable.
Mon Dieu, heaven is full of miracles after all. We found something on which we fully agree.
I should rather put it that you have finally arrived at my own position.
The therapist will see you now, Mr. Shaw.
Rehabilitation calls. Take care, St. Joan.
Mr. Shaw, spare me a moment, please. Look down there. What do you see?
The world, I suppose?
Yes, the earth. But do you see the earth you lived on? The earth I lived on? Or the earth that is there now?
They're the same, are they not? A muddled mass of humanity blundering its way through the same political, social, and religious spasms that you and I attempted to navigate in our own eras. They hear the lure of hypnotic voices and anoint each other as Savior or Satan, according to the echo of their own circumscribed view. The contest is unremitting.
But some voices are trustworthy. Perhaps we can learn from our folly.
It seems rather unlikely, given mankind's penchant for ignoring the inconvenient. But one can always dream. I'll wager there's another Joan down there right now. Another Bernard Shaw. Rude, stubborn, convinced.
Unable to play nicely with others.
Just waiting to be burned at the stake. I wonder who will hear the voices next time, and whose anger and ugly fear will send the flames aloft.
So much hatred, so much waste. Cannot the right voices save them?
I should be loath to abandon all hope. Like you, St. Joan, I am ever open to miracles.
The therapist is waiting, Mr. Shaw.
Mustn't keep rehabilitation waiting. Take care, Saint Joan.
He turns, moving upstage to deposit his book on the small table as the lights dim. Joan is caught in a tight spotlight. In the dimness, George Bernard Shaw can be seen frozen on the open threshold of the therapist's door. Jonah Glynn looks out over the audience in thought, and slowly a hopeful smile blooms across her face. Blackout. The end.
They did great. The genesis for this play really came to me while I was watching the news on TV. And I began to wonder why. we listen to the voices that we listen to. I taught for 1,000,000 years and always had the occasion, whether it was in the classroom or an assembly, to utter this sentence: "May I have your attention, please?" And one day, facing 200 teenagers, it hit me what I was asking for and the miracle that they gave it to me. When we say, "May I have your attention, please?" we're asking for something really precious. Think about that. Whenever we give our attention to something, it's like we're opening ourselves up to take in something. Do we value it? Do we keep it? So my question, why do we embrace the voices that we do cling to? And what changes in us? What changes in the culture? What changes in the world? Because we make that simple choice that I will listen to this voice. Now, at the end of a stage reading, what the playwright really needs is feedback from the audience. That will tell the playwright if there's something she needs to fix, if there's something that landed well, or if she's totally gone off course. I would welcome any comments, questions, reactions you might have.
Not of course. Not of course.
The actors are great, aren't they?
What did you say?
Not of course.
Oh, no, of course not.
I thought it was very timely.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
then I'll ask us to think as we go through the next few days, weeks, and months. What are the voices we hear, and which ones do we choose to keep, to embrace? And thank you for coming, and thank you to my actors and the stage director and the apprentice sound engineer. Yes.
Yeah, I just, at the one point where he says basically you were killed because you threatened the status quo from a bunch of people who were small-minded and didn't want their power threatened. And to me that was the climax.
That's powerful. Yeah, I love that part.
And in how many areas do we find that? Not just religion. How about the culture? How about politics? How about, name it?
Yeah.
When they're in power, they were in power. They had the power, they had enough power to kill her, basically.
Yes, yes.
And so they did.
And they did. Yeah.
Well then, yes.
I think somehow it made me once again grateful to be an Episcopalian, because I think there's a balance here. If we listen both to Joan and George, I hear there's just God, and there's God's voice in me, and it's passionate, and I'm going to act on it, and it's fiery. And then we have the more rational George, who ponders everything and thinks and critiques and has his cynicism. And I think that for me, it's that both and that we really need. We need this conversation to go on continually, at least it seems to me.
At one rehearsal, Jim made the observation about Joan, and what I say?
Well, yeah, I think Susan was just saying the same thing. As much as Joan and George argue, they agree. Mm-hmm. They're on the same side. They just might come to it from different angles, but they agree.
That's how I saw it.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay then, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to switch hats here and become the person in charge of adult formation and tell you all that next Sunday we have off because it's Memorial Day, but the 3 Sundays after that, I'm doing 3 adult formation on voices, and whether it's saintly voices or internal voices or out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, whatever, all those kinds of weird things that a lot of people have and we don't talk about. And Alex, I'm so glad you were able to come. I love the fact that Alex and I are both at this church because, Susan, with what you were saying, Alex approaches everything from a scientific bent and does it quite well and quite convincingly. And he and I have talked because I know nothing about what he does, but I do have experiential things that I'm going to be willing to share. I will say, this is the first time I've ever shared these kinds of experiences, especially not in a public forum. And it does just feel to me like it's time for me to do that. So I hope I can have your support and that you'll come and share your experiences that you may never have felt like you should talk about. So thank you for coming today. It's great fun, great fun.
May 30th this year is the feast day of St. Joan.
I know, yeah, we timed it around St. John's feast day.
No, I don't have to. I act all the time. That's all I ever do. That's all it's all. The microphone.
Oh, you saw it too.
Thank you, it was fun. Thank you, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Thank you. No, thanks for coming. Good job, Jim. Thank you. Yes, it is. Yeah, it takes. So thank you. Trying to get it back up.
No, puzzles too.
Thank you. There was some typecasting there. It is not beyond, it's not going to